Let's go. Buckle up for this week's video.
So you want to make a big career change. You want to try a new company, consider trying a new industry, and even moving cities. You may want to work in tech, but you don't want to be a software developer. But you don't want to go backwards, and you certainly don't want to start from scratch. You've been climbing this hill of your career for the last 10 years, and you don't want to go back to the bottom. The good news is you don't, and in this week's video, I'm going to give you the tools you need to translate your skills and experience. I'm Greg Smythe, coming to you from the heart of Silicon Valley, bringing you weekly videos on how to demystify the career pivot. To clarify, I need to define the problem. You have a set of skills and experiences and want to apply them in a new way. But until you translate them, they have no value to a new company. If you don't translate them, you will have to start over again. There's two actions you need to take. You need to translate your experience and then show evidence that you can close any gap between your current skills and the skills needed by the target company. Let's get into how to tackle these actions. If you like the content, make sure you subscribe and like the video below. It helps me out a lot. One thing to keep in mind as you start to translate your experience is to simplify, but don't dumb it down. You want to, as Steve Jobs says, to bring order to complexity, not remove it. You want to communicate the complexity and the nuance of the work you've done, but to not strip away the difficulty of the problems you've solved. In my experience, using visuals to communicate your experience is by far the best tool. I use what I call a portfolio, but is probably better described as a visual resume. I had a friend tell me when I first moved to Silicon Valley that most people here, they think of a pump jack or even a gas station when they think of the oil industry. They don't really understand the upstream complexities of the oil business. I put together a series of an overall career summary and then put together individual slides for each of the jobs that I had during my career. I bound it and brought a hard copy to the interviews. I used it to add visual context to the answers I was providing. The first slide showed a visual comparison between drilling engineering and manufacturing. The high-level career summary showed both the geographies I had worked in, so Canada, US, and even Russia, as well as the size and scale of those projects. It also showed the diversity of experience I had. I had worked in engineering and operations, communications role,
as well as procurement, which was a skill set I was trying to use to make this transition. I then made individual slides for each of the jobs in my career and included diagrams and pictures highlighting the key projects that I worked on, as well as break down my responsibilities and then visualize the various aspects of that specific role. Your visuals are critical, but they need to be paired with the language that the interviewers are going to understand. Let me give you two examples of what I mean. The first example uses a real-world analogy to explain the scale of oil well drilling. I start off by comparing the offshore platform to the size of the Empire State Building, and that the oil field is about the size of Lower Manhattan and sits about 3,000 feet below ground. We drill wells into the various city blocks, which are isolated pockets of oil, and that each of the individual oil wells are between 8 and 10 kilometers long, which is the distance from Wall Street to the end of Central Park. At the end of that oil well, we're trying to hit a target about the size of a soccer net. As you can see, the analogy paired with the pictures start to tell the entire story. The second example outlines the description of a role I did early in my career at ExxonMobil. It said that I led the fast drill process at Hibernia, which led to millions of dollars in savings. This made perfect sense to me, but nothing to someone outside of my immediate coworkers at ExxonMobil. The first step was to remove the project name and reference the picture of the offshore platform in my portfolio. But the second and most important part was to describe that the fast drill process was a continuous improvement design process, which is very similar to lean manufacturing. Lean manufacturing is a process used broadly across the automotive industry. As you can see, it's critical to remove language that your interview panel will not understand.
So let's talk about the gap. It's important for you to acknowledge that there is at least a small gap between your experience and skills and what the needs of the company are. You'll likely have a gap in understanding the company culture, some of the tools and systems they use, but if you're changing industries, you'll likely have some technical gaps that you need to learn new knowledge or get experience in. For me, I tried to show evidence that I'd done similar things in the past, like moving countries from Canada to the US, taking on very different roles in engineering, communications, and even management, as well as working in an offshore environment where you had to travel by a helicopter just to get to work. Both you and the hiring team know that there's a gap, and acknowledging it and then owning the closing of that gap will send a strong signal to them, because what the hiring team may be worried about is that they'll have to hold your hand or walk you through this process. They will likely be supportive. They don't want to own the problem, and for you, acknowledging it means that you own the problem. To set yourself apart further in this discussion is to actually say this is why you're making a change. that you want new growth, you want to not just close this gap, but to grow beyond it. And that will show the initiative you're taking, and that this is not a bug of your transition, but it's a feature, it's why you're doing it. This will show that you have a hunger for knowledge, a hunger for growth, and that once that immediate gap is closed, you're going to continue to learn far beyond that, adding exponential value to the company. So my challenge to you this week is to sit down and make a portfolio. Set aside 30 minutes, open up a PowerPoint deck, and just take 3 of the most recent jobs and make 1 slide for each of those jobs and start dropping in pictures and giving them basic titles. It doesn't take a lot of time, but trust me, it's worth the effort, especially as you get into the interview process. If you like the content, make sure to like the video below and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week.